Justin Kinner Show. Right here on 1410 ESPN Radio.
All right, we are off and rolling here this afternoon. The Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun food, sports, and spirits. Again, happy Wednesday, everybody. I hope everybody's had a great week thus far. A little late getting the show off and rolling today. My apologies on that. That's what happens when you wear 55 hats. And, yeah, that's kind of where we're at. Nonetheless. But all right, we are off and rolling. Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports, he's going to hang out with us coming up here just around the corner. One thing I wanted to open up with is, college basketball is starting to really take off. Dayton last night, a massive win over Florida State. I mean, didn't just beat Florida State. I mean, just rolled them over. I mean, dominated Florida State on their home floor. I think that, it was a great performance by the Flyers. They're wrapping up non-conference play, and then it's going to be all A-10 play moving forward. Wright State had a big opportunity last night with an undefeated Miami Redhawks team coming in, and they picked a bad time to play one of their worst games of the season, especially from three. Wright State on about 4 different occasions this season in 11 games, now 12. 4 times in 12 games they've made double-digit threes. The problem is they'll have games like that where they just can't miss, and then they just have games where they can't throw it into the ocean, and that's what happened last night. They got hot late. It just was too late. Miami improves to 12-0 on the season for the first time in Redhawks program history there. So things are moving along. All schools about to turn their attention towards conference play, but we'll get more into that coming up in a bit. But it got me thinking about college basketball because, Selection Sunday is such a big deal with that sport. And, Selection Sunday for college football, it's a big deal as well because everyone starts talking about it. Because we speculate for weeks what the bracket's going to look like. And then it finally comes out and then we start talking. Everyone has opinions. I mean, everyone was pissed off that Notre Dame didn't make it, right? Everyone's mad that Alabama did make it. Everyone's questioning why are teams like Tulane and James Madison in the playoff, stuff like that, right? So there's so many storylines and so many people are talking about it. Everyone's talking about college football. Everyone's obsessed with college football. And then Selection Sunday happens on December. What would that have been? Let me pull this up. December 7th. It's now the 17th. 10 days after Selection Sunday, and we haven't had a game. And we're not going to have a game until Friday night. So for 2 weeks, no games whatsoever. 2 weeks. And I feel like it's completely lost momentum. I feel like people I do believe that there's an even bigger audience of college football fans that you would be able to capture if on Selection Sunday you have December 7th on, Selection Sunday on December 7th. This playoff is kicking off a week too late, in my opinion. To me, I'm like, what's the purpose of earning a bye if you are Texas Tech or Indiana, Ohio State, or Georgia? Everyone gets a bye. Everyone gets 2 weeks off at the very least. Ohio State, Georgia, Texas Tech, and Indiana, they all get 3 weeks off. And I got to tell you, I think if you truly sat down and talked to coaches, I don't think Ryan Day likes having 3 weeks off. And let's be clear, the teams that didn't play in their conference championship game, they're getting 4 weeks off. So I'm not a fan of this. I think that that's something that needs to change. The national championship game, guys, is on January 19th. There is no reason for the college football playoff season to be bleeding that far into next year. If you had Selection Sunday, I mean, at the very least, the national championship should be wrapping up in that first week of the new year. I mean, it's almost February. By the time the national championship game kicks off, we're already about a month away from Selection Sunday for college basketball. Now, that's being a little aggressive, but not really. There's no reason that the season should be ending on January 19th, especially when teams who don't make the playoff, they've already started on preparing their rosters for the next season. And now you have to, you're spending all of, back half of November, all of December, and most of January putting your schedule and your roster together while teams are being penalized for winning and advancing in the playoff. I just don't get it. And it's not even about what's fair or right for the teams in the playoff. To me, it's about us as the fans. I mean, we're not going to see the first round playoff games. The first game will be Alabama, Oklahoma on Friday night. But I'm just thinking, like, why in the world are we waiting this long? Selection Sunday was on the 7th. The very first playoff game's not till the 19th. It should have been last Friday. What I do think that the NCAA tournament for college basketball it's such a big deal because it's like, okay, you have Selection Sunday. Everyone knows who they're playing. And within days, this is why I think it's ridiculous. The NCAA tournament put 68 teams in the tournament on the bracket. 68 teams all disperse. Selection Sunday happens. They put out the bracket. They tell you everyone who's made it. And within 2 days, everyone is out and about, and they are going to their destinations, to their regions. 68 teams, figure it out. But 12 teams, and let's just make it 8 teams because the teams that get the bye right off the bat, they can't get 8 teams out to a destination. Like, I think it's ridiculous, and people are going to say it's about ticket sales. You either have a draw of a matchup or you don't. I don't think it needs an extra week of build. But I found myself today, like, I'm starting to lose interest. Like, I feel like this playoff is so far off in the distance. I'm starting to lose interest in it. Are you? Are you starting to lose interest in this playoff? Does it take too long to kick off? There's no reason for it to have a national championship game on January 19th when your first round bye team, or when your teams with byes don't even play till 3 weeks after Selection Sunday. I think that's ridiculous. I have a huge problem with it. They need to figure this out. You know, I love the NCAA tournament. Selection Sunday, bam, 2 days later, you're playing those first 4 games. And then Thursday, Friday, the week of, it's the first round game. Like, that's what this should be. You want to get in. By the way, it's football. You need weeks in between. You need a week in between. You don't need weeks in between. Ohio State, congratulations. You earned a bye. We'll see you in 3 weeks. Oregon, congratulations. You didn't earn a bye. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Do these teams really need 2 weeks? You just played a 12-game regular season. Do you really need 3 weeks to prepare for your playoff opponent? I think that's stupid. This needs to change. It needs to change very, very quickly. There's no reason why we should be going 2 weeks without football games when it's all said and done. I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show, 1410 ESPN Radio. 937-518-1410. That's the number that you can call and jump in on the conversation. Would you like to see, after Selection Sunday, would you like to see these games kick off right away? First playoff game's coming up this Friday night. 2 weeks and some change removed from the Selection Sunday. This game should have been kicked off last Friday. Nonetheless, the Dayton Weight Loss Secret Program has successfully helped thousands of people lose 20 to 30 pounds in a month or two. Schedule your free consultation in person or virtually by calling 937-999-1480, or you could do it online at DaytonWeightLossSecret.com. It's the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. 937-518-1410. We'll be right back. Justin Kinner back with you here, 1410 ESPN Radio, the Justin Kinner Show, presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. Well, we finally get to see some college football playoff action. You know, I got to thinking about it today. I'm like, my goodness, Selection Sunday seems like forever ago. There's really no excuse for us to have to wait this long between finding out what the playoff schedule looks like and when it starts. I just think it's insane. You know, that's kind of where we're at. You know, the NFL, the regular season wraps up, and the very next week, boom, it's the playoffs. The NBA, the regular season wraps up. The next week, boom, it's the playoffs. You know, college basketball, championship, you know, you have championship Saturday, conference championship games bleed into that Sunday, Selection Sunday. We find out who's in, and boom, 2 days later, there's games. There's really no excuse for college football to pull off, to pull a stunt like this, and it's every year. You know, if you want a bye to mean something, if you want to make earning a bye mean something, you know, then allow Ohio State and them to actually have a true bye that other teams don't get to benefit from. Why is Oregon and James Madison getting multiple weeks off? Like Ohio State will not play until December 31st. That is crazy to me. December 31st, and Selection Sunday was on December 7th. That's almost 3.5. That's almost 4 weeks. That's almost an entire month off. A little dramatic. It's about 3.5 weeks, but still, I think that's I do not think that that's right at all. I think it's a disadvantage. I think you're going to see some of these teams look a little rusty. I think it helps Texas A&M and Miami that they're going to play on the 20th and then get to play 11 days later. And that's the other thing, too. These teams are going to play on the 20th, and then you're going to get 11 days between your next game. There's way too many days between all of these dates. Doesn't make any sense. I appreciate the feedback in the comment section. Let's go to some of these comments now on the feedback, but where to go? Ryan Strauss on Facebook said, imagine if Notre Dame gets in the top 4, no championship weekend, and then most likely a first round bye. That's nearly 5 weeks off for them. Yeah, like, and you know, like that's the just I can't wrap my head around that, because he's right. If Notre Dame would have made the playoff as a top 4 seed because they won't play in a conference championship, you know, you could say, well, they won't make that, you know, the bye or whatever, but like, you don't have to be Ohio State's not a conference champion. They took out that thing. So they're, you know, the byes don't only go to conference champions now. So now Notre Dame can get a bye. And if they ever do get that bye, then it's going to be 5 weeks between games. That's a month, and that's uncalled for. Think about when camp starts for college football. These teams are almost getting the same amount of time to prepare for a playoff game that you do to prepare for an entire season. I don't like it. Gary on Facebook says, I agree with you, but they don't want to mess with the Army-Navy game or the Heisman Trophy presentation. I feel like, and I know the number for the Army-Navy game was very solid, but I feel like when people say, man, I got to drop what I'm doing to watch the Army-Navy game. Why are we only patriotic when these two teams play? How come you guys don't give a damn about watching Army or Navy all season long? Like, here's what I think we do. I think because we're all afraid to say we don't care about the Army-Navy game because we're afraid that we're going to be called un-American, which is crazy because it's 2025. I mean, if you eat the wrong cereal, you're being accused of not being a good American. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, everyone's offended by everything nowadays, but I'm here to tell you, like, I don't care about the Army-Navy game, and I'm not going to be guilted into caring about my brother's in the Navy, but my brother's not playing, so I don't really care. I don't care about the Army-Navy game. I just don't. We don't care when these teams are on TV during the regular season, but we're supposed to pretend that, oh my gosh, that this is the same thing as Ohio State, Michigan. Maybe it is, but not to me. I'm American. I love my country. I don't care about the Army-Navy game. So for me, and I think a lot of people feel that way, they're just afraid to say it because you might be deemed un-American. I don't know. I think that's silly, but, and Gary, you're right. Like, I think people, they're afraid to mess with it. I don't know why. Football has said tradition be damned on everything else, but this is the one thing that they don't want to mess with. And the Heisman, I don't care about the Heisman either. You know, they don't even do a good job of promoting that. I forgot that was coming up. I'm a programmer for the station. We carry it. Even I forgot that it was coming up, you know, and the only exciting thing that happened is the hillbilly guy said F the voters And that was the only headline, really. We didn't even talk about the guy that won. Mendoza barely got any attention at all. It was about the hillbilly who cussed out the voters. So, Ryan says the Army-Navy should open the season on Labor Day weekend. That I agree with. And I'm here to tell you, I would probably watch then just because it would be so early in the season. You're craving football. But at this point, I'm craving the playoff. We've been talking about the playoff all season. We finally get to the time of the year where they should be carrying it. And there you go. Deborah, how are you? Deborah says if they want to play into the mid or end of December and into January, why not start the season another week or two later? Do you mean earlier? But either way, I'm not a fan of playing. The season, guys, is going to wrap up on January 19th. That's ridiculous. Oh, they added all these games. Okay, well, why don't you take out some of the wasted weeks? Like, even when it was a 14 playoff, I thought it was insane that you would have Selection Sunday and not play till 3 weeks later. It was the same thing. But they need to take advantage of everyone is talking about the college football playoff on Selection Sunday, and then everyone just disappears for a few weeks. And then they want us all to ramp back up as they build towards these games. And I think you lose. I think there's so many lost audiences across the board because a lot of us are trying to buy back in. And by the way, if my team's out, I'm probably not going to ramp back up for the playoff. It might just be something that's on in the background. For instance, people hate Alabama. They don't believe Alabama should have been in. They're mad that Alabama is in, especially over Notre Dame. People are mad that some are mad that Tulane and James Madison are in. Well, guess what? All the anger and the emotion that fans have towards college football on the week of Selection Sunday, imagine if that very week Alabama's playing. And there's going to be people hate watching. And who cares if they're hate watching or fan watching? Who cares? They're watching. The people, I don't think as many people are going to hate watch Alabama now. They've they're over it. We got really, really mad, and now we're over it. I think they're messing it up. Troy says, why are there no bowl games on January 1st this year? Are there no bowl games on January 1st? I thought, there's bowl games on January 1st. It's the Orange Bowl, the Rose Bowl. I mean, the Rose Bowl is always on the 1st. Ohio State's playing on the 31st, but there's 3 games on the 1st. Are you talking about like other bowl games, Troy? Nonetheless, but either way, let's go back to Ryan. Ryan says, I agree with Joel Klatt when he says that they need to figure out a way to have the college football championship played at the Rose Bowl every year. Shorten the days off in between, get rid of conference championship weekend, whatever it takes. There is no better sight in football than the second half of the Rose Bowl as the sun goes down, weather permitting. And weather permitting, I mean, we know what the weather is over there. It's very rare if it's anything but what it is every single year. I got a chance to go to the Rose Bowl last year. I was going to go back this year, but Indiana had to ruin my life. I'm hoping to go to the Fiesta Bowl. Fingers crossed. Ohio State needs to beat Georgia and Miami for that to happen. But the Rose Bowl was the coolest experience. The Rose Bowl might be my number one sports experience ever. I think that was the coolest experience ever. It helped that Ohio State kicked Oregon's ass. But to be honest, I was massively in love with that event before kickoff. I had already determined that this was the coolest experience of my sport. It was the coolest sports moment of my life before the game even kicked off. I had already made that up in my mind. And then I hadn't even gotten to the sunset yet. Like, that's how perfect it was. But nonetheless, that's kind of where I'm at with that. But I agree. The problem is the Rose Bowl is just kind of small. And I don't think that they're going to risk losing money because of the capacity of that place. But you're right. It should theoretically be that. But to go into a place where you're going to sit 60, 70,000 to a place that sits about 40, I don't think that's going to go well. I don't think that's going to go over well. But I'm with you. I think that should be the case either way. I'm trying to get to as many of these as I can. I appreciate everyone chiming in on YouTube. Kirk says, hey, Justin, thanks for the tickets to the game last night. Thank you guys. Anytime that we have a chance to give tickets out for Wright State, we'll definitely get those to you. Thank you for going. Thank you for listening. Nonetheless, we're going to talk about this more with Jason Fitz coming up in a bit. Troy said, never mind, matchups not set. Yeah, I have the bracket up, Troy. I have the bracket up, and it just has from ESPN, at least the one that we use. But yeah, Texas Tech, Indiana, and Georgia all are going to play on New Year's Day. Texas Tech will play the winner of James Madison and Oregon on January 1st. That's a noon kickoff on ESPN. ESPN will also carry the Rose Bowl at 4:00. And Indiana will face the winner between Alabama and Oklahoma. So we'll know Indiana's opponent coming up at the end of Friday night. This Friday night, Alabama is a 1.5-point favorite at Oklahoma, by the way. And then Georgia will take on the winner of Ole Miss and Tulane. So let me reset that. Georgia will face Ole Miss on January 1st. That's the 8 p.m. game as far as that goes. And then Ohio State will play on December 31st, New Year's Eve at 7:30. That's the schedule as it sits now. So nonetheless, all right, let's talk about this more with Jason Fitz. Jason Fitz from Yahoo Sports. He's going to hang out with us when we return. It's the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. We'll be right back.
The Justin Kinner Show. Right here on 1410 ESPN Radio.
Getting more as a MyLowe's Pro Rewards member is easier than ever with the Lowe's app.
All right, everybody, we welcome you back. It's the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun food, sports, and spirits. All right, we talked college basketball today, which we don't really spend a lot of time on in the months of November, December, but I figured why not? As both Wright State, Dayton wrapping up the non-con, Ohio State 8-2 to start, and we'll turn our attention more towards college hoops later on, I should say early on in the new year, of course. But we're having to do that because it was all about college football. It was all about Ohio State. It was all about Michigan. It was all about Notre Dame. It was all about the college football playoff. And then we just slam on the brakes. And that's what I want to talk about now with our next guest, Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports. Awesome enough to give us some time. Jason, welcome in. How are we today?
And I'm great. And you're right. I think it's one of the dumbest things in the entire college football calendar. I mean, look, find a different way. If we really need a standalone game for Army Navy, if that's what everybody in the world wants, then start the season with Army Navy. If that's what we need to do, fine. But the concept that we just named the playoff teams and then we go through a weekend with no playoffs, it makes zero sense to me. I have all this adrenaline and momentum, and we're going to be rewarded for that with 2 blowout games and then one game that we actually care about, the opening weekend. We should already have been through that.
I mean, should they ever consider, just going from Selection Sunday? I mean, with the purpose of the bye, I mean, all these teams are getting byes technically. All these teams are getting weeks off. That's why I don't look at a value in getting a bye. I mean, if anything, I think if you really ask the coaches of the teams that got the bye, I don't know how much of a value it truly is. I guess you could say an extra week to get healthy, but ultimately Selection Sunday, the next week, those first round games should start and then maybe set the stage for a 2-week gap between or something. I can't stand that. You go through all the build to this, you get Selection Sunday, and then you just sit on your hands for the next couple of weeks. It just kind of kills momentum, in my opinion.
Especially for every team that didn't play in championship game weekend. So, you end up with teams that get rusty. They're just sitting around all this time. So I'm totally out on it. Look, if I was the czar of college football, I'd get rid of conference championship games anyway. And then after I get rid of conference championship games and I've moved Army Navy to kick off, like imagine the pageantry of Army Navy kicking off the entire college football season when we're all starved for college football. We still watch it. It still gets a standalone. We get America. Everybody's happy. And then we get right into the season. You start this thing's just absolute guns blazing. And then the minute you get through rivalry week, you are straight into the college football playoffs. Like, I just think, like, if we go from the Iron Bowl and the game to all of a sudden a week later, we're getting playoffs. That now we're talking. Now you're capitalizing on it. This entire month of December should have been spent focused on the college football playoffs, not the naming, and then waiting a few days for the Heisman and waiting a few days for the Army Navy. And then we get these worthless games to get the one game that we want. Like, it's just the amount of lost momentum by the time we get to New Year's Eve weekend is just going to be dumb.
Yeah, especially, I mean, you think of the NCAA tournament, March Madness, it's Selection Sunday, and boom, 2 days later, I know their first 4 games, but it doesn't matter. It's NCAA tournament games right off the bat. And then it's just for the next 2 weeks, especially for the next week, it's just, you just feel it. And it starts with the momentum of Selection Sunday. Football, it's it's beyond popular, of course, but they still do things very weird. Who knows what changes will come with that. I'm curious your thoughts. I don't know if you saw the clip that went viral, Joe Klatt, calling the NCAA tournament the biggest joke of all tournaments, while highlighting the fact that, he's not a fan of the Cinderella teams. Kind of curious your thoughts on the Joe Klatt clip that kind of went viral, bearing the NCAA tournament and still criticizing college football for letting the smaller schools in.
So, A, I think it was a bad take, but B, I think it was a poorly executed take. Like, sometimes, and we all know this when you sit in front of a microphone, sometimes you start with good intentions and then you roll yourself into a take that you're like, I probably didn't need to go that far, right? Like, to me, I think 2 things can be true. I understand what he's saying when he says, hey, we don't want more teams. And I understand when he's saying, like, letting everybody in isn't necessarily the principle he wants for college football. I would argue that while they let everybody into the NCAA tournament, I'm not really sure that we really believe most of those teams stand a chance. Like, I'm not sitting here banking on Boise State to win the NCAA tournament in basketball or Lipscomb, or Belmont, schools nobody's ever heard of. They don't really have a chance. They get included in it. I think part of his point with Cinderella's is not factually inaccurate. If you look at the ratings overall, what we like are Cinderellas to disrupt early rounds because we love chaos, but we like bloods in the Final Four. I argued that point when I first got on radio in 2016 in Nashville. I argued with my co-host saying, no, I want total chaos. And he was the one that really educated me and said, no, we don't want chaos in the finals. So I went back and looked at the ratings, and he's right. Like, when we get Butler versus Duke, nobody watches that final compared to if you get the opportunity for big brands. So I think Joe Blatt's not factually inaccurate that when we get to the Final Four, we want the biggest brands. But part of the magic is the journey of getting there. And part of the chaos that we love of opening weekend is the fact that really we feel like anybody could do the impossible. So I think the NCAA tournament is the best because it's the best of both worlds. The college football tournament is so wildly different because there's only 12 teams. If we had 32 teams in the college football tournament, I would not care at all if they let group of five, if they insisted group of five teams get in. I just think it's failed when there's only 12 teams that get in. So I think Platt started with probably the right take and ended with just a terrible, terrible, terrible take.
Yeah, like, the NCAA tournament, the reason I don't mind, for one, it's 60 plus teams. There's more teams in, so you could let the smaller schools in. But there's also proof of concept. I mean, every year we see the small schools get wins. Every year, I don't think it's a waste of time to put mid-majors in the NCAA tournament because they can they can hold their own. They don't win all their games, but every year there's 1, 2, 3 mid-major programs that go on these Cinderella runs, and they're the story of the tournament in that first week. And then that's where I dip off. I've always said that. I love that first weekend. I don't mind if they get to the round of 32, maybe a Sweet 16, but after that, from the Elite Eight on, I want the best matchups possible. I remember when Loyola made it. And by the way, to your point, Loyola became so uninteresting that the only interesting thing about them was who? Sister Jean, no offense, but Sister Jean was the only thing interesting about Loyola when they got to the Final Four. So there you go. But no, with football, I just feel like it's a simple game of physics. Basketball, the 3-point shot is the ultimate equalizer. Bigger, faster, stronger could be neutralized by the 3-point shot. That factor doesn't exist in football. I don't know what that factor would be in football to give the smaller schools chances. I just don't think you would ever see upsets, no matter how far you expand this. I don't think we'll ever see the little guy knock off the big guy consistently enough to warrant what we see in college basketball.
Well, if the little guy wants in, the little guy can earn their way in. Like, this is such a backhanded way of talking about college football because Cincinnati got in when there were only 4 teams. Like, there were 4. Cincinnati was one of the 4, right? Like, Boise State got in when there were 12, and they would have been in without the automatic bid process. Like, they were clearly in the minds of everybody with Ashton Genty and the way that team looked that year. They were a top 12 team. Like, you can get into the college football playoff without somebody having to turn around and say, oh, shucks, well, let's let the little one in. Like, this is not 5th grade dodgeball where you still have to make sure that the fat kid makes your team. Like, that's not the world that we live in. The most empowering thing about college football now is if you want it, buy it. At the end of the day, if you want to be great, I'm sitting here wearing a UNLV hoodie as we talk. If UNLV football wants to find their way to the college football playoff, all they got to do is spend the money. Like, now you could go out and say, okay, I want a $10 million quarterback and I want a $5 million wide receiver and I want $3 million edge rushers. Like, you want it, go earn it. Go spend it. If you're not willing to spend it, then it's not my job to put you in. So, I mean, we're acting like Indiana was a college football powerhouse. They were not. Mark Cuban turned around and said, I'm going to make this team successful. And what do you know? Now we have a different way of looking at Indiana. Michigan State, if you'd asked me 3-4 months ago, I'd have told you Michigan State was teetering on the irrelevance for the next 20 years in college football. Then what do? They get a $401 million donation from one man. So, like, if you don't want to be irrelevant in college football, if you want to belong at the big boy table, imagine if you walked into Christmas dinner and there was the adults table and there was the kids table. And you're like, man, it's so unfair. I don't want to be at the kids table. Okay, well, it costs you $500 to get at the adults table. You want in? Get in. So then it's up to you. And that's the thing to me. Modern college football, you got to pay your way to get to the big boy table. But if you want in, you can get in. So it's not my fault that Tulane doesn't spend at the same level. Like, their inability to raise the same amount of money that Michigan State raised for that donation is not my problem. So, like, it's a capitalistic free market world. You want to go out there and spend your way to success, be successful. Don't ask me to cry for you or change the rules just to put you in when you don't want to spend the cash.
You've worked in the world of sports talk. You were a musician at one point. I mean, you still are technically, right? But you love music. Yeah. Let me share with you my favorite song. It's great. to be a Michigan Wolverine. It's great. Is it, though? Is it great to be a Michigan Wolverine? What the hell's going on in Ann Arbor? What the heck?
It's awakening to new modern college football where all of a sudden, again, you want it, spend it. Everybody just presumes, well, we're going to go out and get the biggest name coach. Okay. Well, I mean, look at Kenny Dillingham, widely rumored to be, in the conversation. Okay. For what? Like, just if you're from Arizona, your parents live in Arizona, Arizona turns around and says, you know what? We'll give you a raise. We'll make sure you're in the same tax bracket. Then you go to your family, whatever. Like, if you're married with kids, like so many coaches are, you go to your family and you say, hey, you know what? It's a little bit more money, but we have to move to Ann Arbor, Michigan. Like all of the things that we say as media and fans about legacy, I guess my question is, do we really believe in today's market, in today's free market world, that it makes that much difference to everybody? Quality of life, where you live. Like when I got my first deal with ESPN, it was contingent. There was literally a line in my contract that said, you must move to Bristol, Connecticut. There was no option. Did I want to move to Bristol, Connecticut? Hell no. But I moved to Bristol, Connecticut because that's what I had to do to work at ESPN. Now, when you work for ESPN, they've taken that line out because anybody can work from anywhere. So they don't require people to relocate anymore because the market changed and the way the world changed, right? So I think what we forget sometimes is like maybe you just as a man, maybe you don't want to live in Ann Arbor. Maybe your wife doesn't want to live in Ann Arbor. Maybe you like being close to your parents. Maybe you don't want to move your kids away from the infrastructure. Maybe you're content with what you've got. And also, by the way, you're making $8-9 million a year in one place or $10-11 million. Like when you are making generational wealth as a head football coach almost anywhere, then it's like, well, you have a better shot at a championship in Michigan. Do you? So now play this out. Where's it easier to make the college football playoff? Arizona State or Michigan? Like you start doing the math on that. It's like, no, actually, all I got to do is it's a much easier conference to win over here than it is over there, right? So even the path to the college football playoff doesn't look easier to me to Michigan. So your only argument is we have more NIL money to spend. Yes, you do. But for that more NIL money to spend, you also have more grief. You have more Friday Night Light Buddy Garrity's that are calling you up and saying, why aren't you playing this guy? You have the awkwardness of we're paying Bryce Underwood, depending on which report you like, $12 or $14 million a year. What if you don't want to start him? What if you don't think he's good enough? We can't do that. Spend too much money. These are all real life complications. Michigan's a great job. It's a great school. It's a great football program. The problem is now you can't just write a check and presume that your legacy means something to every football coach. Because when you can make up yours money doing literally anything at any school, do you really need that extra life stress? This is the same reason we all keep wondering when Kalen DeBoer is going to leave Alabama. I've had coaches in college football talk to me about having to move their kids' schools because their kids were getting bullied because of the result on Saturdays. That's real for a college football coach. So if you're living somewhere where you make almost the same money and you don't have to deal with that, where you're not going to lose your job if you lose to Ohio State, I don't know. I mean, I think we undervalue the rest of college football.
Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports, with us here to the NFL as we wrap this up. Joe Burrow, I don't know if we talked about this last week. I can't remember, but when he did the press conference, just talking about how, he needs to be happy to play this game. He needs to be happy. That caught a lot of people's attention. And then you compound that with probably the worst performance that I've seen from him. One of, throughout his career, and he's great way more times than not. We all know that. I mean, how concerned should Bengals fans be? I didn't appreciate the return gaslighting from Burrow and his side, saying, I don't know why everyone's making a big deal about this. You're why people made a big deal about this. And then did it perform well? How concerned should Bengals fans be about just the last sequence of events, Burrow's comments, and then his performance this past Sunday?
Through the roof. I mean, look, we all constantly talk about, oh my God, he gets paid a king's ransom to play a child's game, right? Like we all know that. And Joe's referenced that when asked why he came back from injury. I don't know. You never know what somebody loves, right? And look, when I first was leaving the band Perry and we just had a number one song and I started meeting with people at ESPN, they kept saying, why would you leave the music business? Like nobody understood why I wanted to leave. That was one of the main breakthroughs I had to make with everybody was getting them to understand I didn't want to be a touring musician anymore. And so many people to this day don't understand that. Like when ESPN let me go a couple of years ago, even guys like Trey Wingo, like Trey hits me up on a text and said, you should go back to touring. Like so many people don't understand that, like, I lived that chapter and didn't love it. Right. And so we sit here and say, well, that's the job of a lifetime. Joe Burrow has made so much money. His kids' will never have to worry about how they pay their bills. So now you've got somebody that's made so much generational wealth that he lives different. He will always live different. And he doesn't love what he does. He doesn't love that. Like, you can feel it exuding from him. He doesn't love this. I'd be wildly concerned, because when you are at a spot where you don't have to do anything, you don't have to do anything. And I'm looking around saying, if I'm the Bengals, I need to find a way to really speak to the man, not the quarterback. I got to find a way to speak to the man. I got to find a way to tap his joy. I got to find a way to look at our process to figure out how we can make life better for him. Because if you watch the Netflix quarterback documentary, it was clear there he wasn't. This isn't a new thing. Joe Burrow comes across at least like he's not happy. I'd be wildly concerned about that if I'm the Bengals organization, if I'm a Bengals fan. I'm concerned he's going to wake up one day and say, none of this is worth it. And that'd be such a shame for everybody that loves the NFL.
Yeah, and it's one of those two where I've said before that the best thing that can happen for the Bengals is to hit rock bottom. And they've missed the playoffs now for the last 6 years. I mean, for the 6 years Burrow's been in Cincinnati, they've missed the playoffs, which is a weird concept to wrap your head around. But I actually think that this year, even through missing the playoffs the last couple of years, I don't think they reached rock bottom. The last 2 years, they missed the playoffs, but they finished above 500. They had built-in excuses why they weren't winning games. Joe Burrow's absence, a historically bad defense, things that you felt that were tangible things you can go fix. Or sit back and just let health, play a role in getting better luck. Now they've hit rock bottom, because now they're losing games with Burrow, and he's losing his fight and he's losing his excitement. I know this Bengals fans may not want to hear this, but if this could be what gets that front office's attention to change their ways, and it could also work the opposite. If it doesn't get their attention, whatever will, this is going to be, we say this every year, the biggest offseason in the history of the franchise. But I truly believe at this time that this upcoming offseason for the Bengals just truly might be the biggest offseason in the history of that franchise.
Well, look, I saw the athletic report from their Bengals writer yesterday, day before, that he doesn't believe that any changes are coming for the Bengals. And we all sat there, like my entire Yahoo Sports Daily staff sat there shocked. I mean, we read the article, we sent it around to everybody. We're like, is this real? Because look, I'll be old man for a second. Everybody go back and just look back at Dan Marino's career. Joe Burrow is becoming the modern Dan Marino. It's the Super Bowl in his rookie year, and then it's the organization's reliance on his incredible talent to just make them surrounded by great wide receivers all the time, but they could never put the right roster together, and they were never bad enough to get the things fixed they needed to get. And this was a Dolphins team that won a lot of games, but didn't win the games that they needed to win, and they never got back to the Super Bowl. And now we sit here, and every time I ever interview Dan Marino, I have to ask him, about not winning a Super Bowl, because it's always part of the conversation piece of him. We're watching the modern Dan Marino with Joe Burrow. And the problem is, if you don't study history, you'll repeat it, right? The Bengals need to look back at all of this and say, how do we prevent this from happening? I genuinely believe it's not the fact that they're not winning a Super Bowl, because I think Mahomes and Andy Reid and that combination, that creates a ceiling for a lot of different teams. I'm going to be fair about that. It's the fact that they're not every single year one of the 2 or 3 scariest teams in the NFL. When the schedule comes out, if your team is taking on the Bengals, you should sit there and say, dang, I don't want to have to play that football team. When you've got Joe Burrow as your quarterback, you should be every other team. When you got Joe Burrow with Jamar Chase, with T. Higgins, every other team in the league should be scared to death of the Bengals on their schedule. It is an abject disaster that they aren't.
All right, well, we'll see how things proceed. Again, you have the comments, the poor performance. We'll see how the Bengals turn things around, if they turn things around, coming up. They're eliminated from the playoffs, but you just want to see that there's still some fight left. We'll see what ultimately happens. Jason, you the man. We will not be on next week for the holiday, so we'll see you after that. But I appreciate, everyone loves when you come on. We appreciate when you come on. You give us time. You sit in your car to give us time, man. Thank you so much. I hope you know how much that means to us.
Man, I appreciate you. That friendship is real. And Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to you and to everybody listening. It's incredible. To get to do what we get to do is a gift. So I appreciate you letting me have this microphone platform.
All right, good stuff. Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports. You the man, sir. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you, brother.
All right, good stuff. The Justin Kinner Show, presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. 937-518-1410. That's the number to call and jump in on the conversation. We will be right back.
937-936-0325.
The Justin Kinner Show. Right here on 1410 ESPN Radio.
All right, and we are back. It's the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun food, sports, and spirits. All right. I appreciate Jason Fitz, by the way, giving us some time like he always does. I don't know if you guys saw this. So one thing that we just talked about was the fact that Joe Burrow All right, sorry about that. Technical difficulty. We're back. Sorry about that. No, so one thing that Jason Fitz and I just talked about, of course, was Joe Burrow. Look, I'm hearing a lot of different people say that his comments and play as of late are no big deal. And then I talked to Jason and others outside of the Bengals circle who say, oh, no, it's a massive deal, Joe Burrow's comments. And I guess Joe Burrow just addressed the media a little bit ago, and he had some more comments that have people concerned. I would be concerned by some of these comments. I'm pulling it up. Of course, my phone refreshed. Joe Burrow was asked if he has thought about playing for another team at some point in his career. When I get off work, we have a holiday party, but I'm really looking forward to seeing my wife when she gets off work. And I'm going to ask my wife, hey, do you envision being married to somebody else at some point? And I'm hoping that she says, no, I'm going to be with you forever. You're who I want to be with. I don't think of anybody else. Now, she might be lying, but who knows? I mean, I'm not that great, but you would hope that that would be the case. If my wife asked me that and I said something along the lines of, well, maybe, yeah. I mean, you're my girl, right? Like, I would probably get slapped in the face. So Joe Burrow was asked today if he has thought about playing for another team at some point in his career. Joe Burrow's response, well, you think about a lot of things. That's his response. And in an isolated situation, maybe it's not that big a deal. And for more context, the reporter said, is there any world that you're not the quarterback of the Bengals next year? Talking about 26. Joe Burrow says, I can't see that. No, he can't envision a world where he's not the quarterback next year. The reporter then said, have you ever thought about the possibility of not being here during your career? Burrow responds with, you think of a lot of things. So that's kind of interesting. Guys, Joe Burrow is he's very calculated with what he says. He's not saying these things by mistake. And I don't think he's saying these things tongue-in-cheek either. So that's the thing. So Joe Burrow, I think, is being, and here's the thing about Joe Burrow. I think he's being honest. I think Joe Burrow is fed up. I think Joe Burrow has had enough. And you guys know my take on this. I think Joe Burrow's played a role in this, and I don't mean by his skill set. I think the reason that they win games is because of him, but I also think why they lose games is because of him and not because of his skill set. I think Joe Burrow plays for a desperate organization. I'm a Browns fan, and I remember people saying, well, your organization was so desperate for a quarterback. Look at everything that they gave up to get Deshaun Watson. And my response to that was, yeah, you should be desperate. So you may think I'm about to rip the Bengals here. I'm actually not. But just because I'm not ripping them doesn't mean that I'm not pointing out that there are repercussions to being desperate. The Browns were desperate to get Deshaun Watson. Desperate. They were so desperate to get Deshaun Watson that they were going to give up the farm from a draft capital standpoint. The Browns were so desperate to get Deshaun Watson that they were willing to take on the media, the PR nightmare that comes with the quarterback that had not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, not six. I mean, I'm not going to go all the way up to the total number of accusations against him. That's how desperate the Browns were to get a quarterback. And my defense of the Browns was, if you're not desperate for a quarterback, then why are you even in the league? You should be desperate for a quarterback. The Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes. They should be desperate to keep Patrick Mahomes, to keep him out there and to keep him as long as they can. Every team should be desperate. So that when I say this, I'm not ripping your Bengals like you anticipate me to do. I'm just pointing out that some organizations don't act as if they're desperate for, like, for instance, the Steelers. They take pride in the fact that they're not going to tank. They take pride in the fact that they are going to remain competitive, even with all their deficiencies. And sometimes the only way to fix those deficiencies is to lose games to improve your draft order, but that's not what they do. They don't really show desperation for quarterback. And because they don't show desperation for quarterback, they just run in place. I know they're the division leader. I know they're probably going to finish above 500 again. I know they're probably going to make the playoffs, but they're probably going to get knocked out right away. And they're, the Steelers with Aaron Rodgers are the same as the Steelers with Mason Rudolph. They're the same as the Steelers with Kenny Pickett. They're just a competitive team. The Steelers won games with Justin Fields. They won games with Kenny Pickett. They won games with Mason Rudolph. They're winning games with Aaron Rodgers. They win games. Everybody wins games in Pittsburgh, but you don't win the games that matter. So when the Pittsburgh Steelers become desperate for a quarterback, that's when they will that's when they'll rise to the next level. They're good right now, but they're not great because they're not desperate for quarterbacks. The Bengals are desperate. We're desperate for a quarterback. And they got Joe Burrow. And then they became desperate to keep him happy because they know their ownership group's kind of goofy. They know the city's not great. They know that there's, they know that they don't have all the bells and whistles that the other teams have. So they've become so desperate that they let him run the team and the organization. The Brown family, Katie Blackburn, all right, you look at Duke Tobin, you look at the front office, they didn't want to spend $70 million on 2 wide receivers. They just didn't. Not my opinion. They told you. That's why T. Higgins demanded a trade. That's why things got ugly between the front office and Jamar Chase. We all knew they were going to keep him, but they wanted to keep him a certain way, and it got ugly like it always does. It got messy. But Joe Burrow wanted him to keep both, so they spent $70 million a year on 2 wide receivers. Joe Burrow wanted, he wanted 2 number 1 wide receivers. He wanted Gesicki, right? You guys know this. We've been through this. I don't need to repeat my take on this over and over. But I'm not the only one that's noticed this. National media has noticed it as well and has pointed out to the fact that Joe Burrow had the power a year ago at the Super Bowl Media Row to point out, I need a defense. I need an offensive line. I need a legit run game. And he didn't do that. A season where they missed the playoffs and won 9 games and had a really bad defense. Joe Burrow was more obsessed of putting the pressure on the front office to sign his wide receivers than he was to put the pressure on the front office to improve the defense. So maybe this is actually a good thing, Bengals fans. Maybe the fact that they have reached rock bottom. This is what I was talking about with Jason Fitz earlier. I'm like, I actually think it's a good thing where the Bengals are at right now. It's a good thing that they're going to finish below 500. It's a good thing that they've been embarrassed. It's a good thing that Joe Burrow is pissed off, because that seems to be the only way that the front office responds to things is if Joe Burrow is upset, which is unfortunate because they should look at the coaching staff and say, what players do we need to get you to make your lives better? They should look at the players on the roster and say, we appreciate your contributions. What do we have to do to make your lives better? But the only player they seem to jump at is Joe Burrow. And I'm here to tell you, they're desperate. And they should be. Because you lose Joe Burrow, you lose absolutely everything. But man, they have to find a happy medium. You could be desperate to make Joe Burrow happy, but you can't be so desperate that you make him the owner, the GM, the coach. And that's why I said earlier in the week, when they become the Cincinnati Bengals and not the Cincinnati Burrows, that's when this team's going to take off. They're hitting rock bottom right now. This is rock bottom. I said it earlier in the week. Have the Cincinnati Bengals in the Joe Burrow era officially reached rock bottom? I believe that they have. So it'll be interesting to see what changes come up. I actually think it's a good thing. That front office is hearing Joe Burrow. 2 weeks ago, he said he's not having fun anymore. And if he's not having fun anymore, what's the purpose of doing this? And to have fun means they have to win games. And to win games means they have to get better at defense. And to get better at defense, they have to get better players. And to get better players, that's on the front office. All right? They have to be better in the draft. They have to be more aggressive in free agency. They can't be cheap. They can't head into next season $20 million below the damn payroll or $20 million below the cap. You can't have a defense this bad and then have $20 million left over that you didn't spend and not even try to spend money to make it better? Like, so to me, I think this could be a good thing that they've hit rock bottom, but it could also be a bad thing because if you go into the offseason and they have another bad draft and another mediocre free agent run, and they do bring Zach Taylor back and they do bring back Duke Tobin, which it sounds like they are. I mean, if Joe Burrow isn't enough to get this front office to change their ways, guys, it sucks, but there's not a single player out there that will ever get them to change their ways. As special as Carson Palmer was, he was never close to reaching the level of popularity, of aura, of just the charisma, everything. Carson Palmer was an elite level quarterback, but he wasn't Joe Burrow. So it was stressful to know that, man, Carson Palmer wasn't even good, and he was great, but he was not great enough for that front office to change their ways. And then you see a Joe Burrow come in, and it's like, man, if he can't get them to change their ways, nobody will. So every year we say this upcoming offseason is the most important offseason. Okay. Every year we say it's the most important offseason, and I think that's sports talk fodder, but I truly believe that it is. I believe that this offseason for the Bengals coming up, from what they do with Zach Taylor to how they position that front office to what kind of performance the front office has when it comes to the draft, how aggressive they are in free agency. You know, can they keep this roster healthy over the final 3 weeks? And by roster, I mean the guys that matter, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, because this is that I hate this time of year. You have an ACL injury in weeks 1, 2, or 3. Not ideal, but you're only out for this season. But in a season that's already gone to crap, to lose Joe Burrow to a season-ending injury that could bleed into next year, now you're not only out this season, but you're out for some of next season, and we're right back to where this team is every year. There's a lot to keep an eye on over the next couple of weeks. This team's not going to make the playoffs. They've already been eliminated. But Joe Burrow 2 weeks ago, he's not happy. What does he need to do, to continue playing? He needs to be happy and he needs to have fun. To continue playing, what's the purpose of doing this if he's not having fun? And then he followed that up by having his worst performance as quarterback for the Bengals. And then he followed that up with answering a question today when they said, do you envision playing for any team other than the Bengals? And he says, I think about a lot of things. Joe Burrow is doing everything he can to convince the ownership that he wants to be in Cincinnati. He wants to stay in Cincinnati, but he's not going to stay here under these conditions. So when Joe Burrow ultimately does leave Cincinnati, it's going to be because of this front office and nothing more. And me, who I'm labeled the biggest Joe Burrow hater out there, I think he's a phony. I think he's kind of fake with his personality, but I think he is, by God, an unreal quarterback. The guy's unbelievable. I know that. I think he's a phony. I think he's kind of cheesy. I think he says things just because you guys fawn over him, and you guys hang on every word he says, and he loves that. But I think he's fake. When he got annoyed with the reporter for asking him about Halloween, he thought Halloween was stupid. He thinks dressing up is stupid, but yet every year he does a Halloween photo shoot. You know what I mean? Like it's just little things like that. When they lose a Super Bowl and not even an hour after the Super Bowl, he's up on stage rapping with Kid Cudi. I had a problem with that. I didn't like that. I don't like that you lose a Super Bowl, the biggest game in your career, and you were so arrogant to think that this was, we'll be here plenty of times. Within an hour of losing the Super Bowl, he's up on stage rapping with Kid Cudi. I didn't like that. I didn't like the obnoxious attire he would wear to games for all eyes on me, the attention-seeking stuff. I mean, that's what wide receivers do. I don't like when my quarterback acts like a wide receiver. But it is what it is. And he got away with that stuff because they were winning. And now that they're losing, that foundation's starting to crack a bit. Colton Schmidt said, love the shirt, Justin. I'm wearing a Columbus Blue Jackets shirt, by the way. Wish we could have a segment for hockey each week. Colton, here's the thing. As a sports talk radio host, I have heard hosts force hockey talk that don't know hockey. And I believe my philosophy on this is this. I don't watch enough hockey, and I don't know a lot about hockey. And I feel like I would rather admit that to you and my listeners than to, when we come back, we're going to talk Blue Jackets hockey. I think I would insult your intelligence as a listener by me forcing a hockey topic. And maybe that's on me. Maybe I need to change that. Maybe, I do know this, that there's a lot of great reporters. All right. There's a lot of great media with the Blue Jackets that are willing to come on. Maybe I need to bring them on. I just feel like I don't know enough about it to give you a legitimate segment on it. But maybe that's my New Year's resolution. Maybe I try to bring a hockey segment to the show, and I don't know anything about hockey, but I need to bring people on that do, for guys like Colton who like the Blue Jackets and like hockey. So I'm not mocking that. I'm not saying no. I'm just explaining. I cringe in the field that I'm in when I hear hosts that I know don't follow certain sports and they try to talk those sports. I feel like you're doing a disservice to your listeners if you're going to do that, because you're BSing them. You're just making stuff up. That's kind of where I'm at. But I'm willing to BS. I'm willing to make stuff up. No, I'm just we'll talk about it. But we are going to start the Blue Jackets game of the week. Does start in January. Every week in once we get we don't start that till after Ohio State football, but starting in January when Ohio State football is wrapped up. Every week and throughout the NHL season, we'll be carrying one Blue Jackets game a week. So keep that in mind. We'll be giving away Blue Jackets tickets. We have Blue Jackets gear we'll be giving away. That all starts in January for you hockey fans out there. So keep that in mind. Ron Howard. What up, Ron? Ron Howard asked, will Kevin Stefanski be fired before Black Monday or make it till then? I've been a Stefanski guy for a while. But man, this team's kind of quitting on him. I've told you my approach to this. I believe as a coach, you're allowed to lose. You just can't lose the locker room. Kevin Stefanski has lost for years now, but he's never lost the locker room, and he's always been deemed as an offensive genius. But right now, that defense is elite, and that defense has not been elite over the last couple of weeks. It's almost like they've taken their foot off the gas. And then the offense, not prepared. All right, like as an offensive mind like him, like when you have so many rookies starting, you need to be as buttoned up as possible as a coach, and they're just making too many mistakes that I think go back to the coach. So I think that's on Stefanski, and I think that because of the losing culture that's been there, I do believe that they need a reset. I do believe that they need to get a new coach in there, and I think that's good. It doesn't mean Stefanski can't coach. I just think he doesn't need to coach in Cleveland anymore. And I don't know who that coach is going to be. Jim Schwartz, I think, is phenomenal, and I'm not a fan of letting that guy out, walk out the building. I think that Jim Schwartz, who has done a phenomenal job of keeping that defense locked in despite how poor those offenses have been the last couple of years, he clearly knows how to lead a locker room or lead a side of the ball. I would let Jim Schwartz lead that locker room, lead that. I think this team needs a defensive identity. They are defense. Like that is their identity. But I think that they need to get a young up-and-coming. I'm a fan of the LaFleurs. All right, I think that one of the LaFleur with Green Bay, but there's other LaFleurs out there. I would kick the tires on. I think you need to get a young or Reese. Keep Reese as your offensive coordinator. But they need a shakeup. I think they need to get Stefanski is the face of losing right now in Cleveland, and they need to shake it up. They need to shake it up. We'll see what ends up happening down the stretch. All right, good stuff. I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show, 1410 ESPN Radio, 937-518-1410. The Dayton Weight Loss Secret Program has successfully helped thousands of people lose 20 to 30 pounds in the first month or two, myself included. I lost 30 pounds in the first month. It's technically 28, but, I rounded up. All right, but no, 28 pounds I lost in the very first month of doing this program. And I promise you, it's effective. You got to you got to go all in mentally with it. But you're not there's no injections. There's no pre-planned meals or prepackaged meals that look better on the box on the outside than when you warm them up. None of that. No endless workouts. Call Dr. Justin and his staff today at Dayton Weight Loss Secret. It's here in Dayton. I go for my weekly check-ins, and that's the cool part about it. To me, the value in this is the accountability. Okay, like the accountability of it. Like, oh, man, I really want to cheat on my diet today, but I got to go meet with Dr. Justin and his staff next week, and they're going to know. And I like that. For me, I like having that accountability, having to answer for it. And, if I'm just doing it for me and I don't have to answer to anybody except my wife, who will find the Snickers wrappers hidden in the truck. Oh, yeah, I'm afraid of her. I'm afraid of the staff at Dayton Weight Loss Secret too, in a respectful way, of course. Like, it's all about accountability. And if you have that, which that's what this provides, I think that's the truest value of it all. Call Dr. Justin and his staff today, Dayton Weight Loss Secret, 937-999-1480, or you could do it online at DaytonWeightLossSecret.com. If you missed our conversation with Jason Fitz, we have that again coming up for you here around the corner. We'll be right back.
The Justin Kinner Show. Right here on 1410 ESPN Radio.
If you need new roofing,